Hi everybody, I'm Don Dickson. I want to thank you for joining me again today. We're continuing our discussion on mapping and interpretation, and today I'm going to talk about a specific structure situation that I was reminded of the last time we talked, and I think it fits in here together really nice, and there's a little surprise part of this story that I'll share with you later. It's the one thing I never shared with Buck Perry while he was alive. But I'm going to share it with you today, so stick with me. We'll be right back. Now, as we begin our discussion today, I have to give you a little bit of a backstory, because it wouldn't make any sense if I didn't. So let me give you the backstory. Back in 1978-79, when we did our first Buck Perry summer week-long on-the-water school up in Monaco, Ontario. It was a big job. We had that first year, I think we had 600 or 700 people. We had a bunch of people. A big group every week for 8 weeks. Now, I believe it was around the third week of school. I had a group come in, and I had a real interesting guy who really liked to talk. He was one of those, walks into a room, lights it all up, and he's the star of the show from beginning to end. He was just a good guy. He pretty much knew everything there was to know about everything except fishing. And as it turned out, he was a fishing fanatic. He loved it. He just wasn't real successful. So he was really hoping that this on-the-water week-long school would set him up for the rest of his fishing life. And at the time, I believe he was in his late 40s. So still had a long time to go, we thought. And so he was real anxious to learn, and he came with a fishing partner. And I found out, I think it was the third day of class, I found out in normal conversation when we were out on the water that both of these gentlemen were Illinois congressmen. They were in the House of Representatives. And the life of the party guy, his name was Jake Wolf, by the way, he was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. So since Buck had done some work with states in the past, and I had never done any such thing, but I was alerted to this guy might be a key to spreading the word. He was certainly a man of position, and he had all the outward personality to be able to do it. So I was anxious to make sure that guy caught some fish, and his partner, of course. So during the week, as it turned out, as anxious as he wasn't one of my best students. He was trying, and he was 100% into the entire process, but he wasn't my best student by a long shot. So in our schools, we would train really hard in the classroom and on the water, but then on Fridays, which was the last fishing day of each class, we had a little friendly, what we call a friendly tournament among all of the students. The most and the biggest walleyes, the biggest northern pike and or muskie, and the biggest bass. So even though it was a friendly competition, we did give away some prizes, some spoon plugs, some trolling rods, that kind of thing, some reels. And I think for the biggest walleye catch, we gave away a meter. This fellow that I was talking about, Mr. Wolf, he was not only full of all of his personality, but he was a competitor, as I found out. He liked winning. And he came to me on Thursday night after dinner. I have to admit, I sat down and had a couple beers with him. And he said, listen, I want to win that tournament tomorrow. So he says, I want you to give me a little heads up on what you think I ought to do. Now, mind you, I had some really good students who were solid trollers and had really learned the areas in the river where we were catching all the walleye. And the thought of Mr. Wolf winning this tournament, I didn't think there was much chance of that. But I realized he might be an important guy in my career. So what I did was I said to him, listen, there's this area where this big bar is, and I told him, where we were. We had been there before. And they're 60 feet in the deepest water. As you come up over that bar, it breaks at 42 and 47. I said, I want you to hit the tip of that bar all day long. If I were you, that's what I would do. I didn't necessarily feel like I was cheating any of the other students because I had some good students who really knew what to do. And I thought if this guy just caught a few good fish, it would probably do me some good down the road somehow, some way. I didn't know how. But at any rate, I said, oh, I don't have my lures out today, but to hit that 47 feet in current, you need wire line, you need an 800. You get it with a long line 7, but I prefer an 800. It'll get me down there a little quicker, I'll have better control. But I would put on an 800 spoon plug and on your wire line, and we'd been working with wire, so he knew about the wire. I said, I'd drop down into that 60-foot hole, make sure you're on the bottom, and move upstream against the current until you hit the tip of that bar, 47 feet. Cut across the top of that bar and off the deep side until your lure starts to free run again. Then I would reel up, I'd drop back down the river and start all over again, do the same exact thing. And I would keep dropping in 60 feet, hitting the end of that bar at 47 all day long. That would be your best chance to win this tournament. Well, on Fridays, after working hard all week long, both classroom and on the water, 20-yard days, I basically had a day off. I just raced around different boats and see how everybody was doing, checking on them, that kind of thing. And when I got down to the area where I expected to see Jake Wolf and his partner, they weren't there. So I thought, oh, don't tell me he gave up already and and didn't do what I told him to do. At any rate, I kind of forgot about it. It was around 11:30 in the morning. And we were supposed to meet at noontime, have lunch, then go back out for the afternoon and fish 1 to 5. So after I met with the last boat, we were heading back into the lodge for lunch. It was a pretty good ride, about 15, 20-minute ride. Finally got in there to lunch, and when we were approaching the dock, I saw this big crowd out on the dock. And it was about 3/4 of my class. There was a bunch of people, like 40 people, all huddled around. And I wondered, did somebody catch a big muskie? What's going on? Get out of the boat, tie up, and walk into all of the mess. Here's Jake Wolf and his partner with a double limit of walleyes between 8 and 10 pounds. Smallest fish, I believe, was 8 pounds, 7.5 maybe. It was a hog double limit of fish. And most of the time, people didn't keep fish during the week unless they caught an outsized 10, 11, 12, something like that. But they would keep some fish the last day to take home. I told them that was fine, keep a limit, and you're allowed to travel with a limit each. So they decided they were going to keep this limit of fish and probably win the tournament and then take those fish home. Well, by the time we weighed those fish up, it was ridiculous. I mean, I said, what in the world did you guys do? And he said, sort of under his breath, exactly what you said. We just went up over that bar, 47 feet, all morning long. He said by 10:30 we had our limit, but we caught a few fish. Just kept all the biggest ones. So here they are. Basically, the tournament's over. He's won first place without fishing in the afternoon. So we went out and had lunch. Went back out, everybody else fishing hard, and turned out they went back out fishing. And they almost duplicated in the afternoon what they had done in the morning. They caught 2 hog limits of fish twice in the same day. So after all the excitement ended up in the afternoon, Jake insisted on having dinner with me that night, sitting with me at dinner time. And during that time, and then after dinner as well, he said, I want to talk to you privately. Okay. So keep in mind now, about that time, this was 1980, actually 79. But up until 1979, I had never made more than, I think in 78, 79, I made 20 grand. Prior to that, I'd never made more than 10 grand in any one year. I wasn't in it for the money. I was in it because I had a passion about teaching others the truth about fishing. So I wasn't used to making a lot of money. So when he wanted to talk to me privately, I said, okay, maybe there's something here. Well, let's see what he has to say. So the first thing he said to me was, here's what I want to know. How could you come to Illinois and teach my resident fishermen in Illinois what you're teaching everybody up here and what you've taught me this week? How in the world could you do something like that? Would something like that be possible? I said, well, I'm sure, there's something we could do. I said, but I'd have to give it some thought and do some research. And he said, well, I want you to promise me you're going to do that. He said, because I am the chairman of Appropriations Committee. He said, what that means in lay terms to someone who's not in politics is, he said, I have a lot of power. He said, the governor doesn't even spend any money until he checks with me. Okay. I like that. I said, give me a couple of weeks. I'm going to go home. I'm going to do a little research and I'll get back to you. So I came home, went to the library, did a lot of checking how many people leaving Chicago, basically Chicago, but I used all of Illinois, and going to Wisconsin to fish, going to Minnesota to fish, going to Canada in the summertime to fish. They keep leaving leaving Illinois to go somewhere else to fish. It's the old grass is greener somewhere else. And of course there is good fishing in Minnesota and Wisconsin and in Canada. But the belief was there's no good fishing in Illinois, which of course is not true. It's absolutely not true. But because of a lack of knowledge, no one was fishing in Illinois and no one was catching fish in Illinois. So basically, the state is losing money on their outdoor activities. So I put this little deal together and I found out that the state was losing about $12 million a year on people leaving the state and going out of state, on how much they spend on gas, how much they spend on food and their lodging. I did a whole study on it. And I decided I'd go and try to ask them for maybe $30,000, which would be my biggest payday by a long shot, to teach maybe 10 or 12 massive schools, free to the fishermen, paid for by the state, get big crowds, give me a chance to get the information out, which was the most important thing, second most important thing to me at the time. And maybe I could get 30,000. I thought, but if I ask for 30,000 and they agree to do the deal, they'll probably cut that in half and maybe make it 15,000 or so. I said, which would be fine. To do 10 or 12 lectures for 15 grand. Yep. I do that every day of the week. So I decided that that's what I was going to do. That was going to be my starting deal. Let's do a bunch of lectures free to the fishermen and paid for by the state. First time the state's ever paid anything out to the fishermen. He thought that was a great idea. But before I hit him with all the numbers, I started thinking about it. And I thought about it for another 2 weeks. And I thought, it's a state government. They got lots of money. They got a resource. And they're losing $12 million. So if I can make even a 10% difference in keeping some fishermen in Illinois, I could save them $1.2 million. If I could make a 15% difference or a 20% difference, wow, I could be saving them a couple $1 million in revenue from the fishing community. So, more I thought about it, I thought, I know no matter what I say, even if they like the deal, they'll probably cut my numbers in half. So I said, why not be crazy and just ask for something nuts? So I did. I put in my little written proposal. It was very neat. It was very, very well done. At any rate, I put this thing together, and I sent it to him, and my price was $75,000. Knowing even if they said yes, I might get the 30 that I wanted, or 35. That was my plan. So I sent it off, and a week later, I get a phone call from Jake Wolf. Jake said, I've got your proposal. He said, I like it. And he said, we can probably get this thing passed through, but it's going to cost you some money. Well, I didn't know what he meant. He said, there are some key people in Congress that need to be on board with it. And I know each and every one of them, which ones they are. So he said, you're going to have to come up here to Springfield and buy a dinner for these jokers. And I can promise you, once you do that, I'm going to get this thing passed. I said, well, okay, I can do that. So I'll never forget, took a credit card, which I didn't have. I don't think I had $1,500 maximum on it, but I never used it. I took that credit card and went up to a fancy restaurant in Springfield. I can't remember the name of it. But by the time those congressmen got done with their ordering, including their wine, it cost me over $1,100 for that dinner. There's 10 people. And I'll never forget, I left there, I was sick to my stomach, because these guys had to be on board or it wasn't going to happen. I had to have the key players. Jake kept telling me, don't worry, it's a done deal. They liked you. It's a done deal. But of course I didn't really believe it, and I didn't know how much they were going to go for. So it was about 4 days later, he called me up and said, we're passing this deal. And I said, well, how much are they going to agree to? He said, oh, the way you wrote it up. I said, in other words, $75,000 for 10 clinics. He said, yeah. Folks, I can't tell you. Now keep in mind, the most I ever made since 1970, since I started with Buck, was only in the past 2 years prior to this, which was 20 grand. Now I'm going to get $75,000 for something that's going to take me about a month and a half to do. You can imagine how excited I was. I mean, I was through the roof. But then they came back with a little side thing. They said, but you have to cover the expenses. Whoops, let me close my book here. I want to show you something later. He says, one other thing that we failed to mention, you have to cover all your expenses. You got to pay for the rooms that you're going to be using, and you've got to pay for any advertising. That's all going to be up to you to come out of the $75,000. I said, well, that's fair. That's fine. And of course, they didn't know, none of them knew, how I'd been doing business for 10 years, taking writers fishing, getting free press. How easy would it be to get free press from the outdoor editors if I took them fishing, number one, and successfully caught them some fish, but then having the state paying for everything, it's free to their readership. They'd be foolish not to let their readership know about that. So I knew I could get the publicity basically for free for taking a few guys fishing. I knew I could do that. The hard part was going to be getting the hauls, because free to the fishermen, you're going to get 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. In Chicago, 2 nights, we had 5,000 each night. So we knew we were going to get big crowds. What that means is you need to rent a big haul. Well, here's where I lucked out. I started thinking, well, this is an educational program, so I'll go to all the colleges. Most of the colleges didn't have big enough auditoriums, but some of them did. Bradley University seated 2,500. I did 2 nights there to tune of 5,000 people. But I went to these schools and I said, listen, there's an educational program being presented by the state government. It's free to the fishermen. And I need to develop some meeting places, some halls like your auditorium, but I don't have much of a budget. So I was wondering if you, since it's an educational program and it's free, is there any way you could help me out on the pricing? I think the most I paid was Augustana up in Quad Cities. He said, well, I would have to charge you janitorial fees. And I said, well, how much would that be? He said, $25. I said, that'll work. Now, when I knew I was getting downtown Chicago, in some of these areas, these halls or these big hotels are very, very expensive. Here's where I lucked out. Unlike most states, the money for the fisheries department, And a lot of those activities comes out of hotel motel tax. It doesn't come out of the state funds. It comes out of hotel motel tax. Now, the manager and live-in owner and really cool guy of the Twin Towers was the president of the Hotel Motel Association. They were basically paying me my 75 grand. So I said to this guy, I need your biggest haul. And 2 weeks earlier, I think ex-President Nixon was in there speaking in the same room that I spoke in 2 weeks later. And he said, oh, we got you all hooked up. I said, will there going to be any charge? They said, oh, no, there's no charge. I said, great. It's probably $5,000 a night for this thing, but there's no charge. Okay, great. And he said, and by the way, we got a room for you upstairs to stay. We got a nice room for you, so I'll have somebody check you in and have a bellman run you up. Okay. I go up. They got me on the top floor in a suite, which in the day was $2,750 a night, and that was in 1980. Big screen TV on the wall, big bar, big jacuzzi, huge jacuzzi in the bathroom. I mean, it was first class. They're treating me like royalty, for goodness sake. I'm this old fishing bum, this old river rat trying to make 30 grand. They got me a 75 grand introducing Buck Perry's material to eventually what turned out to be over 30,000 people. And doing it first class, in first class halls, and meeting a bunch of first class people. Folks, I can tell you, it was the beginning of my career, really, where I could literally see I could make some serious money. And all of a sudden, thanks to this little deal that came across from this guy catching all those big walleyes in Monackey, and then having the power to create what was my first real job making serious money, to say nothing of all of the people that I met in the outdoor writers. People became aware of me and Buck Perry, and it just sort of exploded from there. So it was shortly after that once we completed that, the state was so happy, they said, what are we going to do next year? I thought it would be a good idea to make a promotional movie on Lake Michigan, going after the cold water species, namely the trout and salmon. But I've run out of time today, so I'll have to give you that story the next time we get together. So all that being said, be sure to follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done it. There's lots more coming, and we'll see you the next time.